Hello, Tungsten Miner here. This time I'm going to talk about BuildCraft machines. Specifically, I'm going to talk about this filler machine here, and I'm going to talk about the Quarry. So you can see the results of my having gone through a bunch of building and quarrying and whatnot already. I'm going to rewind a little bit and go back to the beginning to show how all this stuff got here. The filler is a machine that allows you to automatically build things or to clear things out. So it's kind of like a automated construction tool. The way it works is you first start with these landmarks, and the recipe for them is just redstone torch, a little bit of lapis, and you build yourself a filler with some gold gears, chest, crafting table, some dye, and one of those landmarks. Once you've got your machine, you need to tell it where to work. And I've set up a little prepared area here to make it easy to demonstrate that. So first you put down your landmarks to define the area on the ground where you want it to work. And then you put down one to say how high. You can do this in any order, I suppose. And then you'll notice I've got one that's kind of in the corner, right? This goes up to there and out to there and out to there. So the one that's in the corner, you right-click that guy, and it's going to create this box. That defines the area. So this is your opportunity to decide whether this is in fact the area that you want to work on. And in this case, I'm happy with that, so fine. I'm going to take my filler and place it down next to one of the landmarks. And I believe it works just as well no matter which landmark you put it down next to. But I have a habit, I guess, of popping it down right next to that initial one. So I'm going to clear the rest of this out just to make it easier to see what goes on here. And now let's open up the filler. The filler is able to create or clear a whole bunch of different shapes. So the default here is fill. And what that means is for every block that's inside of this stripy box, it's going to put a block in that space. So let's take a look at how that works. First, you need to provide power. I've given myself a thermal expansion creative energy cell, so we don't have to fuss too much about where the power is coming from. That's going to power the machine. It's now ready to go, and as soon as I put materials in there to fill with, it's immediately going to start filling. So I throw it in there, and you can see it's tossing the blocks out pretty rapidly, right, because I've got this very powerful source of energy. And each and every block is now filled up. Okay, so now let's demonstrate what happens with another setting. This guy is the Excavate Toggle, and I can tell it to either do or do not excavate blocks when I change the settings. Because of course, if I change the settings now, and it's still powered, which it is, then it's going to immediately start doing whatever it is I tell it to do. And as I flip through the different settings to find the one I want, it's going to start doing all sorts of stuff I don't necessarily want it to do. So I'm going to toggle this on first, and that way I'm not too worried about what else might happen in the interim. So I'm going to briefly flip through and describe each of the settings, and then we'll go back and see what they all do in person. Flatten is going to take whatever's in the area and basically strip it back down to ground level, and then add a floor if it needs to. Frame is just going to make the outline of this structure. Horizon is going to flatten everything out, but it's not necessarily going to make a floor, and it's not even necessarily going to remove items. Oh no, it will definitely remove items that are there, but it won't necessarily add a floor. Pyramid is going to build a pyramid, and there's a couple of different options we'll talk about. Stairs, build stairs, but again, various options we can talk about. Box is going to make a hollow box, so instead of filling like we did here, it's going to leave the middle hollow. And clear is the one I was looking for. It's going to remove all the blocks in the area and not try to replace or do anything else. So that's what I want to do right now. So I'm going to turn off the do not excavate so it immediately starts excavating. And when it's excavating, it's sending out these red blocks instead of the blocks related to whatever thing I've stuffed in there. Okay, great. We've got all this cobblestone. Now you notice it dropped the cobblestone on the ground. The default settings in the BuildCraft config files do not drop blocks. They just go away. So if you want them to drop blocks, then you need to change that setting yourself. I like that, but the guys who make BuildCraft turned that off because, well, when we talk about the Quarry later on, you'll see there's another machine that's used for gathering large quantities of blocks, and they wanted to prevent people abusing the filler, which actually is not too hard to do if it drops blocks. In any case, okay, so there's no materials in here. I'm going to set Do Not Excavate to On, not that it matters. Yeah, so back to cylinder is the last one. You can make them hollow, you can make them filled. So fill we talked about and we saw. Flatten, there's nothing here right now, so there's nothing to flatten, but what I can do is if I put in materials here, you can see that it builds the floor. Now the floor in the flatten setting goes underneath the area that I defined, right? Because I defined the area from the ground level upwards. And you can see my stripey box is not in the ground at all. It's only above the ground. So the floor, or the flatten, is going to create a floor for you. This setting is very handy if you've just dug a big pit and you need to make a floor on top of it, for example, which is something that the Quarry I mentioned does. It makes big holes in the ground. So this is a very useful setting in conjunction with that Quarry in order to fill in at least a layer on top of that big hole. Okay, so up next from Flatten is Frame. No excavating here. Drop in some cobblestone and stone, and we can see it's just going to outline the shape that I gave it. And notice it does not make a floor. Flatten is the only thing that does that. Everything else stays within the bounds of whatever box you define. So I'm going to take out my materials, and I'm going to zip ahead to clear and turn that back off, and have it just get rid of all this stuff. So in between each structure that we ask this thing to build for us, we can easily knock it all down and get back to a clean state here. Okay, next up, let's see, Flatten, Frame, Horizon. Okay, so Horizon is, here, let's do this just as a demonstration. Okay, so I've got some stuff that's in the box, right? It's in the way of the area that I defined. And if I say horizon and flick that, it removed the blocks that were in this area, but it didn't make a floor. So it's a little different from flatten, because flatten is going to add the floor underneath the area you defined. Horizon just says anything that's above that, get rid of it. And reduce it down to that flattest level. Okay, next is pyramid. So this setting has some things in these boxes here, and I've not talked about them so far because, well, they've all been empty and all these other options. But pyramid's the first time where we actually have some choices to make, because there's lots of different ways you might make a pyramid, right? So this one says make the pyramid top side, the pointy side up, or you can make a pyramid the pointy side down. You could make it so that the top of the pyramid is in the middle, or on the east, southwest, south, east, blah, 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 all these different ways. So let's take a look at making a pyramid with it on the east side. And we'll drop in some blocks. And sure enough, we can see I'm now looking east, and the pyramid has been made so it steps up to something on the east side, right? And of course, if we go through all of our various other options, we can imagine exactly what would happen, right? So southwest, it's going to be in that corner. South, it's going to have the same shape that this has, except pointed in a different direction. And then center here it's going to equally go up towards the center in all sides. Let's zoom ahead to clear. Get rid of this structure. I use this machine a lot when I'm doing large-scale constructions, or when I'm preparing the ground for a large-scale construction, because that clear feature is really super, super handy. Okay, next up, let's get back to pyramid. Next is stairs. I'm not going to demonstrate stairs. I think you can pretty well imagine it's going to look a lot like pyramid, except instead of coming into a point from all sides, it's just going to gradually step up to a certain direction. And you can make them upside down or right side up, either which way, having them point in any of the cardinal directions. Box is going to fill in the area, except instead of like completely filling it in, you can see it's leaving the center hollow and then puts a roof on. So if you like having your 9x9 houses, then this is a good way to get that in a hurry. And then finally clear. So toggle this. And then I believe we have one last one, which actually is best demonstrated on a much, much larger scale. So let's do this. I'm going to put this one down. I'm going to walk. Actually, one of the things I should mention about these landmarks is if you give them a redstone signal, they will show you exactly how big of an area they can cover. So this blue marker goes out 64 meters in each direction, and so you can easily use this as a guide for how big a structure you can actually make. And if I march all the way out here to 64 meters and plop down my landmark, then go all the way out to the other corner here and plop down a landmark over here, and run all the way back to the center. And then put down my vertical one there. Now I'll get rid of this guy, set off my markers. That defines my box. Put down my filler. And now I'm going to give it some instructions in that I want a cylinder, which is hollow. Cylinder is going to make, as you might not be surprised to learn, a cylinder where it's going to try and compute the roundest round that it can do based upon whatever size you happen to have your cylinder set to. So if you give it a very small space, it's going to have a hard time. And if you give it a very large space, it'll do a lot better. Oh, power. There we go. So as you can see, it's working out the math for us to try and make the roundest cylinder it can with the size that we've given it. So if you've ever yourself tried to make something really, really big and round and had to do lots of interesting math or looking things up online to try and figure out what does a pixelated cylinder of such and such size will even look like, no more. This filler will do it for you. And so I have now, within just a couple of moments, made as big a cylinder as I could want. Now you notice it stopped working. Because of course this is such an enormous structure that I didn't give it nearly enough material to complete the job. And so all I need to do now is give myself some more stuff to work with. And you notice I can pick whatever the heck blocks I want and just toss them in. And it will go ahead and throw them out for me. Note blocks, sandstone, cobblestone, a little bit of birch planking, whatever. Doesn't matter, it'll chuck it out there. Okay, that's going to be busy for a little while. Let's go and talk about the next machine, which is the Quarry. A quarry, like the filler, uses landmarks to define its region, but you only need to define a two-dimensional region for a quarry. So I'll make one here, and I'll make one over there, and I'll put one over here. You do have to make sure they line up on the same boundary or it won't work, but there we go. Drop down a quarry. Okay, so talking about this message. Unless you're pretty new to Minecraft, you've probably heard about chunks before, but just in case you are brand new to Minecraft, this world stretches out infinitely in every direction, right? So I could walk and walk and walk and walk, and I'd never arrive at the end of anything. that obviously isn't going to work because your computer doesn't have an infinite amount of CPU or memory, so it can't have the whole world loaded and running all the time. What it does instead is it divides the world into 16-meter chunks. And that's what allows it to keep things going at different rates. So here I've got a mod installed called NEI, which lets me see where the chunk boundaries are. And so by hitting F9 a couple of times, I've got this little grid turned on, so you can see where the chunk boundaries are. Now, the quarry sometimes will take a very, very long time to get all of its work done. And so what it's going to do is any chunks that happen to be inside the region that this thing is mining or containing the quarry itself will be kept loaded while it's doing its work, and even afterwards. So this chunk, because it has the quarry in it, this chunk, because it's one of the areas being mined, and this chunk, because it also is one of the areas being mined, are all going to be kept loaded. So that message we saw about quarry at such and such a place will keep 3 chunks loaded, that's what it's talking about. Now, the side benefit of this is that when a chunk is loaded, machinery in that area will keep running all the time. So even if I had, say, a filler running, or if I had some machinery from a different mod running, or if I had a pump that's pumping water and keeping an engine cool, you can use this guy to keep those chunks loaded. But back to the quarry. Get rid of our lines here. Oops. So the quarry has no interface. You can right-click this all day long, nothing happens. What it does instead is when you provide power, it's going to build itself a little gantry. There we go. And then start digging. And it makes a big old mess because it doesn't know nothing about where to store these blocks, right? So it's just tossing them every place. And you can give them whatever you like to keep track of things. I'm going to take a void pipe here and attach it to the sides so that things don't make a mess. And all of the stuff that it's very rapidly digging up is going to go into that void pipe and get destroyed. Now, I'm in a flatland world, so there's nothing of interest down there for it to find, just lots of dirt and some stone eventually, and ultimately we get down to bedrock, and that's all. There's no ores or anything interesting. But of course, in your world, you will have some ores and you will have some interesting stuff. Rain, rain, go away. And when you're digging down with your quarry in a survival world, you'll potentially find any old thing that comes in there. And as I mentioned, all the blocks that it finds get dug up and then passed into a transport pipe or a chest or any other inventory that you might have next to your quarry. And here we are, we're finished. This went really fast in this example because, one, I chose a pretty small area for it to work in. But just like our massive structure over there, you can make this up to 64 meters by 64 meters. And this requires a lot of power. And I'm using a creative energy cell, which can provide power up to 100,000 RF per tick, which is quite a lot of power. So this thing goes really, really wicked fast. The third reason is that this is dirt, and dirt's pretty soft. So this thing takes as much energy or effort to drill into an object as it would for you with a pickaxe or shovel or whatever to drill yourself. So if you have harder things like obsidian, then it will take more power to break that block than it would for something like dirt or sand. So when you make a quarry for yourself, you might find that, one, it's a really huge power drain. I won't get into the exact numbers here, but if you are curious, you can go look them up. It's a lot of power. You'll probably want like 4 combustion engines running on fuel continuously to keep a quarry powered. And even then, if you've got a really large one, it's going to take a lot of power. But on the other hand, it's going to give you each and every block from wherever level you started at all the way down to bedrock. And if you are clever and notice that you can run into lava and you can run into water and all sorts of other things down there, you can get around that to a large extent. Jeez. I have a lot of mods installed. If you start off by placing a water bucket in this top corner, once it's already open, that doesn't do you a lot of good, right? But if I start off here, let's say I make another little quarry over to the side here. Now I've got my area defined. I'm going to make, nope, not a filler. I wanted a quarry. There we go. And that. So he's now defined that area. He's going to start digging in this space, right? So he's going to start digging a hole, not including the area under where he is, but right there. So if I drop a water bucket here, and then say go, by giving him power, he's going to begin, and that water block is going to start spreading out. But as it goes down another layer, it's going to spread out again, and again, as much as it needs to, and it will wind up filling this entire hole. Now, one thing this does for you is you can now get down to the bottom of the quarry, at least by swimming, and then swim back up again if you want. But it also means if it encounters any lava down below, the lava is going to harden into obsidian right away. And so instead of having lava which prevents the quarry from working, and so no further blocks in that space that are covered with lava will get dug up, instead of that, it will harden to obsidian, and then it will mine the obsidian. So not only do you drill out the entire mine, but you also get yourself a bunch of obsidian in the process. Oh dear, looks like I made a mess again. Stuff does get everywhere unless you remember to put the pipe on there. Okay, so that's kind of it for the quarry. It's one of the most important machines in BuildCraft because it gives you an almost infinite supply of all the kinds of things you normally have to do a lot of digging for. You know, iron ore, gold ore, diamonds, redstone, all that stuff. If you've got yourself a quarry and you've got yourself a power plant to drive it, then you can dig up everything you need. So despite all the other machines that I'm going to get to in a little bit, you know, I hardly ever wind up using a lot of them. I mostly wind up using the filler, and after that the quarry. So next time, I'm going to move along and start talking about all the rest of these machines from BuildCraft. If you like the video, go ahead and hit like. If you want to hear about when that next video comes out, hit subscribe, and I will talk to you later.